Just my week.
technically before he was canonized,
Yes.
hence why they don't have a halo outline.
Right. He was considered a passion bearer at that time, but they knew it was going to happen eventually.
Talks.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you for coming out on Friday night in summer to learn a little bit about Alexander Schmorell, Saint Alexander of Munich, as he's now known. He's been somebody who's kind of come along with me in my journey into Orthodoxy and through Orthodoxy, and he's just kept coming up. Without further ado, shortly before her death in 2013, the BBC caught up with a woman named Lilo Forstrand, and the reason was because she was a really good friend of Alexander Schmorell, who has now been sainted by the Orthodox Church and had been about a year before the interview. But she had also known other members of the group that he was associated with. The group was called the White Rose, and pretty much all of the main members of the group were arrested for their treasonous activities and executed for that.
There was one of them, Sophie.
Yes, Sophie Scholl was one of them.
I've got that movie saved on YouTube. I
Yeah,
haven't watched it yet, but it looks interesting.
yeah. There's one from 2006, and there's another one that's more just about the group as a whole from about 1982, and that one's really good too, but it's really hard to find in the U.S. This is the article they had, and it was really interesting. She had little insights into people, and she's the one who's actually written this book about her friendship with Alexander Schmorell and another young man who wasn't part of the White Rose, but he had connections to a group in Berlin, and he had family members who were executed, and actually his sister-in-law was the only American woman to be executed by the Nazis, and she grew up in Wisconsin. Just, yeah.
So the White Rose was a organization that formed as a resistance organization.
Yeah.
A lot of young people.
It had a few members. One of the girls who was involved with it pretty deeply, who they managed to cover up as much as she did, so she survived. She actually only died last year. Her name was Troutley the Friends. And she said one of the things that was disappointing once they all got arrested was knowing that there really were only, the small group of them, that Hans especially had made it sound like there were lots of people supporting them and he was getting connections everywhere. They were trying to do that, but they hadn't had it yet. Anyway, with this BBC article, it was really interesting, but at the end there was something that kind of annoyed me. Her friend Alexander Schmorell was made a saint by the Russian Orthodox Church in 2012. He would have laughed out loud if he'd known, said Forstrand. He wasn't a saint. He was just a normal person. And, she knew him. She knew his faults, and she knew the silly stuff he pulled and everything like that. I don't necessarily have an issue with her saying that. But with the BBC kind of, the church decided to glorify someone, to make somebody a saint, and then now, even his friend says he was just a normal person, and that's, really the Orthodox Church doesn't make saints. We recognize them, and it's not because they were perfect throughout their whole life, but because they're working in their lives towards God. The Orthodox Church love about the Protestants and the Catholics and the Western expressions of this. And so in some ways it really does seem very, very odd that you'd have a saint that came out of Germany in the Orthodox Church. And there's a picture of Alex. And Lilo knew pretty much the whole group. So Alex, his best friend Christoph, Hans Scholl, Willie Graf, who is, there are people who are working towards his case on canonization of the Roman Catholic Church. But it's a lot more difficult in the Roman Catholic Church because there's a lot more paperwork. The woman that I talked to who's building this dossier or whatever has over 1,000 pages so far. Sophie Scholl, and then this is Professor Kurt Huber, who he wasn't doing stuff with the group so much, but he did write one of their leaflets. And the thing is that they're known for the most was writing leaflets contra the government and the Nazis, and distributing them and trying to get people all over the country to rise up and resist. Let's see. So, right here, I'm going to start, because we're talking about Alexander Schmorell, I'm going to talk a little bit about his history. He was born in Russia, in a city named Orenburg, which is way out in the middle of nowhere. I went there for an event in 2007, and this is basically the type of landscape you see for hours and hours and hours and hours. The city's about an hour north of the border with Kazakhstan, and I mean, I've lived in Idaho, I've driven across Alberta. I've never felt like I was in the middle of nowhere so much as I was there. And the train, I took the train back from Orenburg to Moscow because, you know, the romance of the Russian rails or something like that. And it was 26 hours. This is in Orenburg, right kind of on the edge of what they call European Russia and Asian Russia. So when you cross this river over the bridge, you got the side that says Asia, and then if you look the other way, I don't have other posts, the other side of the post, it says Europe, but this is looking back into European Orenburg over the river. I don't know if you can see here, but Moscow's right there, and then Orenburg's right there. And from there to there, it's 26 hours on the train, and then Munich, all the way over there.
So he was born and raised there also for a good part of the time?
His mother died when he was about 2, but his father was a German citizen who was born in Russia. His grandfather had come to Russia to make his fortune as a young man and did quite well as a furrier, set up shop in Orenburg, and so Alex's father grew up there. He was like the 11th of 11 kids or something. And then, and then he was born there. After his mother died, his father's second wife was also a German citizen living in Russia. And they would have loved to have stayed there, except that Alexander was born between the 2 Russian revolutions in 1917. And things from there only got worse. And so in 1921, his stepmother's family, there were 12 siblings, and all of them and their spouses and their children and other various people got up and moved to Germany because they're like, this is, we can't do this anymore. And it was lucky that they did because if they had waited any longer, they would have been trapped in Russia for a very Alexander's father was a doctor. He had studied in Munich, going to med school. He had hoped to set up shop in Moscow, but there was a lot of anti-German sentiment, and so he was forced to go back to his hometown. But they ended up back in Munich with his wife's family in the area. This is a picture of Alex's mother, who died when he was one, probably not quite two. This is his father and his mother and him when he was about a year old or so. This was 1919, so his mother had already died, and it was before his father had remarried. And the funny thing is that there are some places that you read that his mother was Russian Orthodox because his father wasn't. His father was Protestant. But that she was the daughter of a priest, and that's why Alexander was baptized Orthodox rather than Protestant. But there's somebody who's probably done the most research on the family, and he does it in Russian. His name's Igor Kramov, and he's written a couple of books. He disputes that. I forgot exactly what she said. But when I met him in 2007, the reason I got to go to Orenburg was because I connected with him. He lives there. He just said it was almost impossible to find any information about her family. She wasn't from Orenburg, and with all the chaos, and Russians just don't keep records the way that Germans do. Yeah. So that's 1990. So his father hired a nanny, and the nanny became part of the family, so much so that then when they left Russia, she had no right to leave with them, being a Russian citizen, and they married her off to Alexander's father's older brother who was dying, so that it wasn't a real marriage, but she could say she was part of the family to leave to go to Germany, and she stayed with them for the rest of her life. And that's her in 1960, shortly before she died. Her name's Feodosia Lashina, but her headstone for a long time said Francesca Schmorell, because that's what the German records said. So being a doctor, the Schmorells came to Munich, and they had property and stuff in Russia. Some of that money came to them. They were not poor off by any stretch of the imagination. This was the house that they lived in Munich.
You said her father was a doctor?
So Alex's father was a doctor, and it's probably one of the reasons why he went into medicine. Because he he had the aptitude for it. He was very good in chemistry, especially. But he adored his father. His father probably indulged him quite a bit too. It also kept him from being on the front lines and short some of these service times in the army and such. So that there were definite advantages to being in a medical program. This is a picture of Alexander somewhere in the, I think about 1940, he was in France there, because one of his military places, service places was France. Alexander had two half-siblings, and both of those were raised Roman Catholic, the way that their mother was. However, Elizabeth Schmorell made sure that Alex didn't lose the Orthodoxy, even though she wasn't Orthodox. His nanny would take him to church, but she paid for private religious instruction, because you had Protestant and Roman Catholic instruction in the schools, and he was neither. He had to sit through the But it was, the identity of being Orthodox was more than just, I'm Russian, so I'm Orthodox. When he was about 17, he met a young man named Christoph Probst, who was a new student in his school. And the two of them were just fast friends from the beginning. I think they were the only two students in the class who weren't Catholic. Christoph's father had been very interested in Eastern religions, and so Christoph had grown up in kind of a non-religious household. Christoph's father that year committed suicide, and so they kind of shared the thing of both having lost a parent as well. This was, a friendship that would go through to the end of their lives. And this is actually, you usually don't see, in the books they usually don't have both these pictures next to each other, which I just think it's so funny because, reading books in a little bathtub or something, on a dresser, and then, and then the second one they're just smiling like crazy. Yeah. Also, as part of this, Christoph had an older sister who was about 6 months or so younger than Alexander, and Alexander fell in love with her head over heels. And this book here is probably 200 pages of letters that Alex wrote to Angelica. Since this is kind of the topic of this is the letters, this is one that when he was about 19 and he was stationed in Germany somewhere, it was a service thing, and he's writing his nanny, "Dear Anya, you've now sent me a postcard and also a letter, and I haven't made an answer to you. To wish you all the best for the holiday," which was Pascha. "Please forgive me and don't be sad. It's not just you I haven't written. I haven't written others either, really nobody. You surely know me that I dislike writing letters as much as reading them. We had all hoped that we would be back on May 1st, but we're still here and I don't know for how long. Sorry, maybe I'll be able to be back soon. The weather here is so glorious that it almost seems as if this type of weather never happens by us. There hasn't been a cloud in the sky for weeks. Everything in nature is blooming, flowers and trees, so that it's a real joy to go out walking. The evenings are so warm and comfortable that one hardly wants to go to bed, but it's gotten late and one must go to bed. Greet Lisa, and they think the woman who researched a lot of letters thinks that this was the lady who would read the letters for his nanny, and she never learned to read or write. So this is Greet Lisa, kisses, you're sure. As I kind of alluded to before, as much as he said he didn't like reading or writing letters, he certainly, Angelica was definitely an exception. On that same day, he wrote her a very, very, well, not very, very long, but probably a couple of pages, just discussing things kind of day to day, touching on some themes from Dostoevsky, and that one in particular, talking about how he dislikes wrongs of mindless people and how it relates to Germany in some sense. But it's kind of the beginning of the theme that you see in a lot of his letters. He's like, well, I would leave Germany if I could, but I can't. But on the other hand, his idea of Russia was his father's, kind of in Dostoevsky times, not the Soviet Union, what was happening there. This is him on a horse. I'm not sure exactly how it is, cut off from the data. But one of the things he really, really loved to do was horseback riding, and it was one of the things that he 5 hours every day. I received the music he sent me yesterday and immediately began to play Charity. Now that it's come to pass that I've got to dig this all up because we're moving on tomorrow. Of course, we don't know where we're going. And there's a little bit about mailing instructions and stuff. As for me, I'm alive and I'm healthy. I'm eating a lot of butter, but instead of vegetables, I've been taking vitamin C tablets. Don't get worried if you don't hear from me for a while. Who knows how long the mail will take, and more than that, when I'll be able to find the time to write again. However, I will try to send off a little card a little bit more often. Greetings to you all. Kissing you heartily, your Shura. And then his number for mail, and greet Antony. Many thanks for the chocolate.
Kaki, what was he doing for a living at this time?
He was a student.
Well, he was a student.
Yeah, so they had the German system, they had gone from semesters to trimesters, and they were kind of staggering. Okay, you get to study for a semester and then you have service, or you get sent, for the men, they get sent to the front line, out to war somewhere. So this was in France, 40, and it was early. And this one I think is just funny. He's 22 or so. Dear mother and father, I'm still alive and healthy, and I hope everything my you is holding together. We don't know anything about what we're doing next, but we're still here in the area of your necks. Let me know more about Russia and Romania, since otherwise I don't hear a thing. Please send me a chess book, a good one from a well-known chess master. I received a chess set. Greetings to you all. Your Shura. There's another. Please send me a book, but only one, because I don't have space for more. And then the problem with some of this Angelica stuff is that as much as he was absolutely in love with Angelica Prost, she got married in 1938 when she was 19, and her husband was about 10 years older. And Alex started college in Hamburg to be closer to her, and it seemed to be okay. But both of them loved riding horses, and she got a new horse in the spring of 1941, and he came up to help her break in the horse and build a riding path and stuff. And it seems like even though she was married, that it became more than a friendship. So there are lots of letters that are kind of like this one. Angelica, today I am so incredibly lucky. 3 letters from you arrived, bringing me your greetings and your kisses. And once again, I've received a little photo of Angelica Elizabeth. You know I'm putting together a cute little album just for your pictures. My calendar is already almost full, and besides, I only really stuck them in there hastily. Please send me many, many pictures of you, my dearest. All of them. Full except for the ones in your album. That should remain intact. Even though there are some photos in it that I would like terribly. You'd like to know what my schedule looks like, and I haven't gotten around to that yet. I shall do that this morning, but I've got to get into the city now. So this morning reading will be coming with me so as to be with you as soon as possible. For the book, I send you this here. You do a little red kissing lip thing. A long, long kiss, and when we'll see each other next, I'll pay you with an even longer one in person. See how the wind has carried my message to you. So shall it always be a messenger of our love. And always, when it breezes past you gently, I think about tenderly caressing your hair and your face, upon which I press tender kisses, and when it blusters and howls about you, I'll hug you so tightly you can hardly breathe, and kiss you half to death. Take care, and until this afternoon, always, your Alex. And he did write her a longer letter later that day. This kept up for about a year. That there was a lot of letter writing, and when she was around, they would hang out together. He went up to visit her once secretly, and she and he were the witnesses at Christoph's wedding, and let's see, by mid 1942, by mid-1942, it doesn't seem that Alex has necessarily given up on the dream of Angelica, but she had spent a lot of that spring in Munich and decided to go back to her husband, and I think that was kind of a tough blow. In this book, and I don't know if it's the last letter he wrote her or if it's the last letter that we have necessarily, he writes to her, this is a copy of how it actually looked. Angelica, beloved, hot beloved angel that you are, don't be terribly sad if I sometimes don't end up writing to you as often. My thoughts are with you like no one else, neither so often nor so long. Innumerable dear, dear hot kisses, tender hugs from your sure. However, things were changing. Alex in Munich, he was focusing more on art, and he was spending a lot of time with a girl who he met in art class, and that was Lilo, sorry, here. And he was around her apartment so much that they told the people that they were cousins, that it didn't raise any eyebrows or anything. But he was spending more time with Hans Scholl, and both Hans and Alex had a lot of personal charisma. Many people describe Alex as being sunshine, just like sunshine walking through the room, or when he smiled, it was the greatest thing ever. And Hans was a natural leader. Together, the two of them authored 4 leaflets excoriating the Nazi state, comparing Hitler to the devil, encouraging Germans to sabotage the war effort, and asking them to reproduce and send on these messages to help build up resistance. Written under the authorship of the White Rose, these leaflets almost immediately caught the attention of very high-ranking officials in the government. Adding to this, the medical students, Alex, Hans, Willy Graf, and a few more, but not Christoph, because as a married father, he was able to stay back a little bit more. But the others were being sent to Russia to get some practical experience in the field. They ended up not far from Moscow and were signed up for 3 months. Alex spent the second half of this time incredibly sick, but the first part was a homecoming of sorts, where he enjoyed mingling with Russians, talking with them, singing with them, and bringing his friends along to experience this with him. I can't imagine what the priest of the local church thought, having multiple German soldiers come in, not to shut the service down and pillage the place, but to stand and sing. Alex absolutely fell for Russia completely. And although he hated the communists, he got it more and more in his head that he wanted to go back. And not only that, but he had it in his head that in order for humanity to be saved, the world needed to become a little bit more Russian to do so. There's also some indication that he may have been trying to connect up with anti-communist people in Russia when he was there, but it never came to anything. But Hans and Alex knew that if the White Rose was going to be effective, they'd need to have a further reach. And they had more people involved now. They had Sophie, Hans' sister, they had Willy Graf, they had Professor Kurt Huber, and even to some extent Christoph. Through Lilo, Hans and Alex were trying to make contact with a group in Berlin, and they started gathering up material, paper, stamps, envelopes, as well as procuring the means to print more. Some of this stuff was stolen, but a lot of the stuff that they actually purchased was purchased with Alex's pocket money, because he had that much money.
Which you got from his father?
Yes, and you know, if he wanted to have art classes, he could take art classes. He did writing and fencing and piano and sculpture and drawing.
So his father was subsidizing his education.
His education, I don't know that the university costs that much, but, all these private lessons for everything, he could afford. So the first four, so two more leaflets would be produced, one authored primarily by Professor Kurt Huber and the other one by Hans and Alex. This time, instead of copies that were produced in the hundreds, they were produced in the thousands, and all of them risked their lives taking them to different places to send off, so that it seemed like they were coming from everywhere at once. And Billy Graf especially took a whole bunch with him to his friends from Hebrew a lot. And if any of them had gotten caught with them in their backpacks or anything, they probably would have been done at that point. Then, there are two letters from late 1942 and early 1943 that survive, which were written to friends of his, where it's clear that Alex was feeling a deep unease and restlessness of the soul. One is to a woman he met in Russia. Everything seems strange, foreign, and unusual these days now that I've been to Russia. No longer can I get accustomed to what is considered European here. The cultured life, never. To a young woman named Margarita Knittel, whose father was a well-known author and who herself became a concert pianist, he wrote in early 1943, I received the very sad news from my homeland, from the incredibly dear people who won me over. Joylessness and sadness have become my true companions, true friends who never leave me even for the blink of an eye. Now, I do believe he had a talent for kind of overstating his piece in a lot of situations. His next lines, then suddenly a bright ray of the sun appears in this otherwise black and stormy sky, the dear lines from you. He goes on about Russia and music, but near the end he mentions this, how happy I am for you that you like it there in the mountains so much. And the restlessness, dear Margarita, this is something we need. May you never lose this restlessness, this affliction. Unfortunately, Hans and Sophie Scholl were caught distributing leaflets at the University of Munich on February 18, 1943. From the first hours, Alex's involvement couldn't be hidden, and he found himself trying to flee with the help of Lilo and another friend, Nikolai Malgaskian. Unfortunately, he didn't make it, and he was arrested in Munich during an air raid at about 11:30 p.m. on February 24th. By this time, Hans, Sophie, and his dear friend Christoph had all been executed for high treason. Alex believed from the beginning that this would also be his fate, though his parents did everything that they could to help him, including finding him a lawyer, having 3 of his stepmother's brothers, who were decorated Nazi officers, to petition Himmler to grant him a pardon, to petitioning Hitler himself for help. And they ended up going to prison for being that bold. In prison, Alex was allowed to write his family once every 2 weeks. I found these letters many years ago and was moved enough to translate them to English. And I posted those up 20 years ago. And I retranslated them now just to make them a little bit less clunky for language and everything. They were all written after his trial, so he had already been sentenced to death. And along with him, Professor Kurt Huber and Willy Graf were sentenced to death at the same trial. So the first one here. Dear parents, there's nothing new I have to write to you. Each day here among us is like all the others, and the time passes very quickly. Dear father, dear mother, if I must die, should the pardon be rejected, I need you to know that I have no fear of death. No, therefore you ought not be concerned for me. I ask So you start having I'm not bothered by that, but let's trust in God and pray and hope for a better outcome. And just realizing kind of the love from his family all around. There had been some awkwardness between him and his stepmother because their personalities were the complete opposite of each other. And obviously it wasn't because she didn't love him or anything like that, but I guess one of the things was that he wouldn't listen to her on the whole nonsense with Angelica, so she confronted Angelica, telling her that this needs to be stopped right now. That didn't go so well. So from the second letter, my dear parents, there's nothing new to report here. Everything is the same as it's always been. There's one thing that I'd like to say to you though, so that it might be so much easier to carry this thing. Should the pardon be rejected, please be mindful that death does not mean the end of life, but rather the opposite, birth and a transition to a new life, a glorious and everlasting life. And so death is nothing really so terrible. Parting is what is incredibly hard and difficult. But this will be less so if you can remember that this separation will not last forever, but only for a while, as if for a trip, in order to be able to meet again forever and for always in a life that is unendingly more beautiful than the present one, and which there is no end to us being together. Heartfelt greetings from all of you. Sure. And he pretty much knew that any pardon was going to be rejected, and they were. And the letter that Himmler sends back to his uncles is absolutely cold in the highest sense. They try a little bit to separate about, this is their daughter's stepchild, but she's raised him since she was little, and the answer is like, well, if you have a bad seed in the family, the best thing to do is just get rid of them. Yeah. And by this time, the pardon was rejected, but they didn't know it yet. June 5th, 43. Dear Mother and Father, once again 2 weeks have passed by. I can hardly grasp how quickly the weeks fly by. One hardly has time to look around when it's Sunday again. I'm doing fine. Health and state of mind are reasonably good. There is nothing new that ever goes on here. I receive very good books. And I am allowed to sleep as long as I would like. I sleep 11 to 12 hours, and so I am needful of nothing. Every other day I walk for an hour, and yesterday I even got to bathe. I hope that everyone is healthy at home, and that you have been able to comfort each other somewhat. Do not give up on the hope of a reunion, either here on earth or there in eternity. God arranges all things in such a way that we will happen, and in such a way that is best for us. We have to be willing to always trust Him, and to fully commit ourselves into His arms. He will never leave us. He will always help and comfort. Greet everyone from my heart, especially Natasha, Antoni, Kanya, and Maria. Hugs and kisses to you from your Shura. So it's like with each one, there's a little bit deeper sense of trusting God for all things. June 18th. My dear parents, I have new news to report to you. Myself, I am healthy and in a good state of mind. Just recently, I was reading a passage in a very good and meaningful book that pertains quite well to you. The greater the tragedy of life, the stronger one's faith must be, and the more it seems as though we've been abandoned by God, the more closely we must command our souls into the bodily hand of God. And the holy abbot Theodore the Studite writes, therefore I thank God for my misfortunes, and brought myself down fully under the incomprehensible judgments of His providence, in which He, in a beneficial manner, already foresaw the time and place of death of every man before the creation of the world. This is pretty much the same as what I've already written to you myself. It would make me very happy if you could think exactly like this, as it would relieve you of much sadness and pain. And I'm not dead yet, so please pray and do not lose hope. Greetings from the bottom of my heart. Sure. The next one one is from July 2nd, and it's addressed to his 18-year-old sister. And his parents and his sister had been arrested originally when he was arrested because it was just kind of the Nazi policy of arresting family members. But then they had been released, and they had been arrested again, and she ended up with an eye infection. So his sister ended up with an eye infection that ended up detaching the retina in her eye, and it was extremely painful. So he knew something, he knew a little bit about this, and so it's one of the reasons why he's writing her specifically. My dear Natasha, I am certain that you have read the letters that I have written to our parents, so you are pretty well aware of what's going on. You'd perhaps be surprised then to know that as I write you, that from day to day I become more at peace internally, even happy and joyful, so much so that most of the time my state of mind is better than before, when I was in freedom. Where does this come from? This is what I want to tell you now. This entire terrible misfortune was necessary to bring me to the true path, and for that reason it really wasn't a misfortune at all. Above all else, I'm happy and thank God that He allowed me to understand the direction He was pointing, and because of that allowed me to arrive at the true path. What did I really understand earlier about faith, about true deep faith, about the truth, and last importantly about God? Very little. Now, however, I have come so far that even in my current situation, I am happy, calm, and confident, come what may. I hope that all of you have gone through a similar spiritual development, and that after the deep pain of separation, you are able to come to a point, together with me, where you are able to thank God for everything. This whole misfortune was necessary in order to open my eyes, but not only me, but all of us whom this has afflicted, our family as well. Hopefully you all have also been able to correctly discern what God is pointing to. Heartfelt greetings to everyone, and especially to you, for be sure. And so, I've kind of taken it another step, not just trusting God, but to actually thank Him for the misfortunes, and that there's something to be learned from them as well. Apparently, the situation with her eye was so serious, he got to be a little one out of the schedule. I've received word about Natasha's eye problem, and therefore I've been allowed to write a short letter outside my normal schedule. Hopefully Natasha is being seen by Professor Wesley, who's the best specialist for eyes. I wouldn't give much credence to the results of the examination of the University Medical Clinic and how things work over there. You can also see that the injections aren't having any success, so that'll try out to play blood. It couldn't hurt, but she must follow his instructions precisely. You'll see that it will be successful. I send my heartfelt greetings to you. You're sure. And part of that is, it's interesting because it's a very practical thing, but he's mentioning people that he thinks are trustworthy, that aren't going to take revenge out on his sister because he's in prison for treason. He's waiting to be executed. And Dr. Pligot is actually Christoph's stepfather, if I have that right. But then, the interesting thing about it too is it ends up being 2 days before his execution. So July 13th, he's able to write one more letter to his family. My dear mother and father, now it has come to none other than this, that, and be it God's will, my earthly life shall come to a close in order to go into another which will never end, in which we will all meet again. Let this reunion be your comfort and your hope. Unfortunately, this blow will be harder for you than for me, since I am going over to the certainty of having served my deepest convictions and the truth. This all allows me to await the hour of my death with a clear conscience, despite how quickly it draws near. Think of the millions of young people out there who have lost their lives in the field. Their lives are on mine as well. Greet all of my dear friends from my heart, but especially Natasha, Eric, Mania, Antoni, Maria, Agnieszka, and Andrei. In just a few hours, I will be in a better life by my mother, and I will not forget you. I I will beseech God that he grant you comfort and rest. And I will wait for you, above all else. Let me leave you with this on your hearts. Never forget God. You're sure. And then there's a little PS. Professor Mueller comes along with me and he sends along his heartfelt greetings to you. Now, as it kind of continues that progression, and he was able to see an Orthodox priest on the day of his execution. He was the only one who had a lawyer. His parents found a lawyer, somebody who was willing to stand up for somebody who was accused of treason. But this lawyer came and visited him occasionally, and he did come on the very last day, and he couldn't believe how calm Alex was, and just, Alex said to him that if somebody were to offer to take his place, that he couldn't even do that, because he knew that his whole purpose in life had been served, and he wouldn't know what to do anymore. And Alex wasn't glorified as a saint because of the letters, but they do demonstrate an incredible spiritual growth in the last months of his life, that he was even able to thank God for the situation, even when it meant he lived to see his 26th birthday. He achieved something in prison that he didn't have in freedom, a soul that, instead of being constantly restless, was resting in God. And the other thing is, though, that, of course, Lilo didn't see him in prison or anything like that, so she wouldn't have, she's not Orthodox, and so when she says, oh, he was a normal person, well, yes, of course he was a normal person, but it doesn't mean that he wasn't somebody who worked on that path towards sainthood. And it was interesting in 2007 being in the presence of one of Alex's friends, Nicolette Mazostrian, who had also helped with Lilo to try to get him out of the country, came to the trip in Orber that I was on, and he was just absolutely wonderfully nice guy. He's also Orthodox, and he also got to see Alex glorified as a saint. I think he did come to the glorification ceremony and everything. But there was a dinner, and one of the things he wanted to say was that, it wasn't like Alex went around and he was sulky and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna die, and it's like, no, he was somebody who absolutely loved his life. He loved all the things that were open to him and that he could do, and he was, despite some of the, I can't live here, it's so terrible, somebody that brightened the room when he walked in and stuff, and it's like, yeah, he didn't, and to me it's just like, and I don't remember exactly off the top of my head if Nikolai made the point or not, but it's like, but he loved God more, and that, the way that we see saints, it's not a thing of being perfect, but letting our souls be perfected by God.
Okay, what was some of the titles of some of his pamphlets that he wrote? And the nature of some of them?
So there were 4 that came out in the summer of '42, and they just said Leaflets of the White Rose, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2 that
Are those written down? Were they published anywhere?
yeah.
Awesome, okay.
Yeah, they're probably, if nothing else, there's the White Rose Foundation in Munich, and I'm sure they have all of them in German and English and probably a couple other languages. When I had my website up, I had them in 4 languages because the official translations were in 4. They were working on Polish, but but I was not up to getting all the little dots and lines and everything on the Polish characters. Publish that.
They were encouraging German people to resist or to
Resist,
form more
sabotage,
groups or
all of it. All of it. I mean, one of the lines that I love, you know, is they're comparing Hitler to Satan, and it's like every word out of his mouth is a lie. When he says this, he means this, and it's very descriptive. But
did he and Bonhoeffer have any dealing with each other? Did they know each other? Or?
no, Bonhoeffer had some.
Maybe he was later or something. I don't know.
Well, so Bonhoeffer was executed in 45. It was one of these last. So the thing was is that at the very end of the war, when the Nazis knew that they were losing, they made a last-ditch effort to try to kill off anybody who might be witnesses of some of this stuff. So like, they came for Christoph Koch's wife and their 3 little kids. And she had already left the town, but her father had been shot as the Americans were coming into Munich. But Bonhoeffer was somebody, they figured that he was safer in jail in some sense. When he was there, he wasn't necessarily uncomfortable. But as the force, I don't remember if it was the U.S. or the Allied or the Soviets who were coming in where he was, they quickly executed him before. Yeah, I mean, you know, just some of that at the end was just, it was so hastily done. There's another student who later was trying to collect money for the Hoover family because he believed in a lot of stuff that these people were writing about. He got caught, he was executed, but his sister, who was not in the same city, and was like 17 years old, was also arrested and had the Americans come a couple of hours later, they probably would have executed her before they came in. But I mean, it's just
Where was Alexander executed?
in Munich,
In Munich.
in Schmorell prison, and he's buried behind the prison. And then, you know, it's interesting because he belonged to the parish of St. Nicholas there, which is a real poor parish and has a long history. But they lost their church during the war and everything, and because it was the land was requisitioned. Not that I don't think it was like a fancy church or anything. And they were told that they could use this church in the middle of Munich, pretty much on permanent loan. But after 20 years or so, they started feeling pressure from the city of Munich. Hey, we really like our church back. We'll help you move, but we really like our church back. And it got to be a lot, but it's really, really hard to buy or build churches in Munich. And behind, so there's Stadelheim prison, there's this cemetery, and then behind that was a U.S. military base, and they built a church military base because it was, I think it was near housing. I got a map of it somewhere, but the base closed 91 or 92, and so they're selling off all these pieces of the base. And the parish had looked into it, but they couldn't find who was in charge of this or who to contact. Alexander Schmorell's, all his files had been taken to Moscow. And with the fall of the Soviet Union, it it was the first time a lot of these researchers got to take a look at any of these files, and there was, so yeah, it happened in 92, and somebody found Alexander Schmorell's files and sent copies of them to the church in Munich, saying, hey, and they have, so Archbishop Mark has been bishop of Germany and certain other parts of Western Europe since the 80s, and he's a German convert, and he speaks Russian, he speaks Serbian, I think a couple more Slavic languages, like a native. Everybody I've ever known who speaks Russian, who's heard him speak, can't believe that he speaks so well. But he's insisted from early on that there be high quality materials in German. And so they got these files, and somebody, I don't know if it was a monk or somebody, wrote an article for their German language magazine that comes out quarterly about the Orthodox Church. And somebody saw it and ended up contacting them and saying, I know who to talk to if you're interested in buying the church and the former American military base. And by this time, there were a couple of other groups that had put in offers that were almost twice as much as the Orthodox group could afford, but they decided to put in an offer anyway. And wouldn't you know it, but those other two offers fell through, and they were able to purchase the church. Now the thing about that American church is that in the winter, if you stand at the foot of Alexander Schmorell's grave, you can see the church. You can't see it in the summer because of all the trees. Yeah, so that's the stone, and that's kind of the updated version of that. And that's Nikolai Nordberg. I think he died in 2013 as well.
So he basically was canonized because of he's an Orthodox Christian who helped create civil disobedience against the face of evil in Germany during the war.
Well, I don't know exactly how all of it goes. From what I understand, being a martyr would be enough. But the thing is that it seems like, through his prayers, things have happened, especially for that parish, including that they were able to get the church that's right by his, where he's buried. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because even with myself, it's like he kept coming up over and over. All these coincidences over many years. I moved to Germany and went to, it wasn't even his church, it wasn't even his jurisdiction, but there's it was a Russian church under the Moscow Patriarchate, and in the bulletin, there's a picture of Alexander Schmorell, and this is before most people even ever heard of him. He wasn't glorified. I'm like, gee, that's weird. And did you hear the story of the icon a little bit earlier? Okay, so this icon here, Live Journal back in the day, 20 years ago, had a really lively orthodoxy section, and there was a young man there by the name of Paul Drozdowski, who is an aspiring iconographer, but he got a commission for an icon of Alexander Schmorell, and he didn't post, so he posted to Live Journal, not to the Orthodoxy section, but to the Orthodox about, does anybody know what Alexander Schmorell would look like? I got this commission and I don't even know where to start. And being as I had already read some stuff on him, I had something to start with. I had just been to the Roquefort Cathedral, the former military church. I've seen him on the iconostase, so I can tell him what he looks like on the iconostase, and I could give him the priest's email saying, you ought to talk to Father Nikolai because he knows the best. And I asked Paul to, let me know how it turned out. I saw that, and when I was back in the U.S. and making a little bit more money, I commissioned him for the same one. But you can see it says Passion Bearer there because it was before the glorification, which happened in 2012.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Are there any final questions or comments before we wrap it up?
So Israel excited and also you, I assume?
No.
Yeah.
And there's a very practical reason for that. In Germany, they don't bury one person in each spot. They go deep, and it's usually 3. So since he's buried with his father and his stepmother, but since he was the first to die, he's the one at the bottom. And I mean, there's been talk about, I guess there was some consideration of bringing him back to Russia, but what happened was that they took some, they were able to do a delegation, I think, with a priest or a bishop or something, take some earth from Wartburg and bring it into Germany. And knowing the Germans, it's like, how did that happen? it's all these ordinances and regulations and stuff all the time.
So why did Angelica marry the other guy instead of him?
I don't-
Financial, maybe?
It could have been. I mean, he was 10 years older and he was
He's a poor
running
student,
the
too.
school and he's a poor student. And I mean, there's certainly, yeah, I mean, I don't know. And I mean, Angelica and her husband ended up getting divorced in 45 and I don't think she ever married again. But
Okay.
yeah, her ex-husband ended up marrying the sister of Willy Graf, who was also executed with white rose, which is such a weird happenstance. It's like, what?
Thank you, Pastor. Everyone, feel free to take as much more time as you would like in the row of
Seconds.
yes, for